What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads live, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel. I am joined, as usual, on Monday nights by Daniel Starkin. We appreciate you joining us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Periscope, wherever you were joining us. We appreciate you. I know it's a holiday week, so Merry Christmas to those who celebrate. Happy belated Hanukkah to those that we've missed. You finished. If I missed you, apologies. Daniel, how are you doing? Holiday season, a few days till Christmas. Nothing going on in the baseball world. How are you holding up?
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I'm doing great. I just wish there was more going on the hot stove. It was tough this year with no real winter meetings. We haven't really seen much happen yet, and with the unknown financial landscape moving forward, who knows when moves are gonna happen. So this
Yeah.
isn't fun, but I'm happy to be here talking Dodgers with you.
Yeah, I always joke when you and I are on like a text message thread with Trevor Lane over at Lakers Nation. It's like to be in the basketball media world is good. I mean, like the season ends, you have like
Yeah,
a
right.
month, 45 days until the next season starts, free agency, the
Yeah,
draft. Like it's
right.
like every day something new is happening. And baseball is
Yeah.
like we're scrounging. Like Jeff Passan made news by tweeting some guy getting fired up by looking at a picture of the pharma bro or whatever. That's what we've got in the baseball world. Well, I'll say one thing. I mean, I'm excited. I finally got my World Series champions hat.
There
I
you
don't know if you
go.
can
It's
see it.
looking good.
October. It's like I ordered it from Lids back in end of October. It
Yeah,
finally
right.
arrived. And the whole time, I'm like, is this $50 well spent? Not well spent. I'm pumped. It's my new favorite hat. It's got World Series champions on it. So we're gonna have that forever. Finally arrived. We're beautiful. We're ready to go. Well, again, for those joining us on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, we appreciate you. Make sure you're checking in with us via the chat. I've got some trivia questions. I'm going to ask Daniel a little bit. Tonight, the topic is all Dodger bullpen. And so, make sure you interact. We can all see what you're doing. We want to interact with you there. But this is our fifth and final installment of kind of a roster review. We looked at the prospects in the 40-man. We looked at the infield. We looked at the outfield. Last Monday, we looked at starting pitching. And then we saved what I think is the most interesting, maybe the most
Yeah.
controversial piece of the Dodger roster for last. Although I guess we could have done coaching staff. That might be the most controversial. Maybe we'll touch on coaching staff next week. But we're going to get into this in detail. But Daniel, I want to start with you kind of with just a big picture question. As you look at the Dodger bullpen, looking back to 2020, even back to 2019, and just focusing on what it has been for the last 2 years, how would you characterize it? I guess I'll ask it this way. If you had one word that you could use to describe the Dodger bullpen for the last couple of years, what word would you use to describe it?
Um, yeah, I'll go with good, which is not great. It's not outstanding, but it's also not bad, right? Like
Yeah.
if you look at a lot of the statistics, they've been at or near the top of the league in most of them. As much as Dodger fans love to think that they have a horrible bullpen that blows saves every night, that just hasn't been the case. They've actually been really good. But I will say is I feel like at this point right now, they lack a truly elite arm. And I feel like that's how it was in 2020. Like they had a lot of guys that were good and even really good.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the one true guy that you could truly depend on to come in and close the door down, get 6 outs if you need it, whatever the case may be. They're missing that one true, top five reliever in baseball from me, giving them more than a good in this category.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that kind of segues perfectly in what I want to say. I'll look to the chat. Harpazo 2020 used the word shaky. THP also throws in shaky. Inconsistent is another word that he mentions, which all kind of fits into what my word. I think the Dodger bullpen has actually been underrated for the last 2 years. I don't think there's a part of the roster that gets more flack than the bullpen. And partly,
Definitely
I
not.
think I think that's because of how Dave Roberts uses them. I think there's a lot of controversy surrounding the bullpen that isn't necessarily the bullpen's fault, fault. But I also think, dude, there's been historically bad moments. Like when they blow it, that's the part of the team. Like if Corey Seager strikes out, nobody remembers that. If Kenley Jansen blows a save, everybody does. So
Yeah.
all that said, I'm not sure we really spend enough time talking about how well the Dodger bullpen has held up because again, like you, I think most people would describe the bullpen as average to pretty good to maybe good. But I actually think the Dodger bullpen has been elite. And you kind of referenced this. Let me throw some numbers at you. You know I'm a numbers guy and a
I
stats
know
guy.
you're a
So
numbers guy, much
2000
more than me.
to 2020, here's the Dodger bullpen. Third in wins above replacement, second in ERA, second in FIP, first in walks per 9 innings. The one category they were bad in this past year was strikeouts per 9. They were one of the worst, 23rd in all of baseball. Second in exit velocity, fifth in innings pitched, and then tied for 16th in blown saves. So that's another category they're poor in. And you could say, hey, small sample size, yada, yada. Let's go back to 2019 because it's basically more of the same. Ninth in wins above replacement, fifth in ERA, sixth in whip, 12th in strikeout rate, third in walk rate, first in exit velocity, 27th in innings pitched. So just to put that in context, they accumulate the ninth most WAR with the 27th most innings pitched. And again, they struggled in blown saves as well that year. But my point is, I mean, you're looking at a team that has been second and fifth in ERA the last 2 seasons, and yet most people don't like this part of the roster. That's the part that kind of cracks me up and always throws me for a loop.
Yeah. A couple points. First, let me just address the blown saves thing there. Yeah. I would say that's on the surface, that looks pretty bad. Like, yeah, they blow a lot of saves, but at the same time, if you add in some context, right? Like the Dodgers win more games than any team in baseball, which means they're leading more games than any other team in baseball. So there's more opportunities to blow saves there. So I don't know how that would fall in line with maybe the percentage of blown saves compared to how many times you lead in a game. But just looking at that, it's a you can take it out of context a little bit. But yeah, what else was I going to say? I'm forgetting here. I totally forgot, so I'll throw it back.
I mean, yeah, all that's to say, like, and I will say this. I think the 2020 bullpen gets a bad rap, but people probably aren't totally familiar with how bad bullpens were all the way around baseball. So you might say, hey, the Dodger bullpen wasn't great. Well, they were second in ERA because everybody else was that bad. And again, 2019, they were fifth. 2018, they're top 5 in ERA consistently. Exit velocity, StatCast, that kind of stuff. I mean, second this year, first in 2019. So I think the Dodger bullpen, the word I would use is underrated. And I'll just to add, 2019 to 20, some guys that they lost: Kenta Maeda, JT Chagua, Russell Martin, big part of the 2019 bullpen that wasn't part of their 2020. Casey Sadler, Yimi Garcia, who was actually great for the Marlins this past year. Of course, they bring in Blake Trinan, Jake McGee, Victor Gonzalez kind of comes up. They bring in Gratterall and Alex Wood as well. So again, we've talked about the numbers. This group was really, really good relative to the rest of the year. And so as we dive into 2020, looking back one more time, Daniel, this is where I've got some trivia questions for you, okay? And if you're in the chat, if you're joining us on YouTube, I see Larry talking about Liam Hendriks, Brad Hand, Blake Trinan. We're going to get to all those guys. I promise. Yeah. I promise. Caleb Ferguson, some quotes in there. So hang tight on that. But stick with us, and here's some trivia questions you can answer along. I've got some questions. Okay, Daniel, here you go. Which Dodger reliever led the team in wins above replacement in 2020? Which Dodger reliever led the team in wins above replacement in 2020?
That's tough. I'll say Blake Trinan.
Okay, Blake Trinan is his guess. Let's see if we can get anybody in the chat that wants to throw in a guess. Which 2020 Dodger reliever led the team in wins above replacement? Harpazo 20. Oh, go ahead.
Just real quick, while people are getting their guesses in, I remembered the other point I was going to make. It's really quick, but you mentioned the low strikeout percentage, and I feel like we've talked about this before. A lot of that comes down to the Dodgers had a lot of sinker ballers in their bullpen last year, and that's more conducive to ground balls than strikeouts. So Freeman has already said they're looking to address that. They want some varying looks, maybe some guys that throw 4-seamers. So that should help get the strikeout numbers up. That's all I would say.
Well, we got 3 guesses. We got Jake McGee, Victor Gonzalez, and Adam Kolarek. Jake McGee is the correct answer. 0.7 wins above replacement.
That was the other guy I was thinking about guessing.
Okay, here's your next trivia question. This was one of the Dodger relievers pitched 9 innings out of the bullpen and 0 earned runs. 9 innings pitched, 0 earned runs. Which Dodger relief pitcher am I?
0 earned runs. Is it like, is it Kolarek?
Kolarik's a good guess, but it's not Kolarek. Ray says Wood. Charles will give you a shout out. Subscriber. Harpazo says Gratterall. The answer is everybody's favorite. Everybody's favorite Dodger reliever, Mr. Just Reliable, Joe Kelly. 9 innings pitched, 0 earned runs in 2020. I couldn't believe it.
Great year for Joe, huh? He became a meme. He won a World Series, and he didn't give up an earned run.
I mean, he allowed everybody else's inherited runners to score while he was out there, which I think is why nobody guesses it. Yeah. So 9 innings pitched, 0 earned runs. Okay, I got a few more of these. Now, aside from Joe Kelly, guys who threw at least 10 innings pitched, who do you think had the lowest ERA among Dodger relievers?
Lowest ERA, Victor Gonzalez. No, his was pretty low in the
Now, who
ones.
did you guess on the last one when I said 9 innings pitched,
Oh,
0 runs?
Caleric.
Caleric. See that you were on the right path
I
there.
was there.
Caleric,
Okay.
0.95 ERA for Caleric last year. So he was really impressive. Here we go. I got 3 more trivia questions for you. Which Dodger relief pitcher led all of Major League Baseball in allowing the lowest percentage of hard hit balls against him? Led all of Major League Baseball. Number 1 in baseball.
It's the big man closing it out, right?
Kenley Jansen. Kenley Jansen. So we got some Caleb Ferguson guesses. Kenley Jansen. He was lowest in all of baseball in exit velocity, or excuse me, in hard hit. He was 5th lowest in exit velocity. I mean, like the StatCast on Kenley kills me every time. Okay, 2 more. Which Dodger pitcher was second to Jake McGee in strikeout per 9 innings?
Strikeout per 9 innings?
Yeah. Not Gratterall. That's the hint I'm going to give you here. Right. Not hit Gratterall.
Well, that I know because he had actually
3.86. That's Gratterall's strikeout per 9.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's so small. I'll go Kenley again for that one.
It's not Kenley. Gonzalez was a guess. That was Caleb Ferguson. 17 and 2/3 innings, 13.75 strikeouts per 9. He had a 3.06 ERA. Okay, last trivia question for you, Daniel. I think you got one right. So I believe, well, you kind of got two.
I got one.
The Caloric one, you were sort of on the right path on the Caloric. I'll give you half on the Caloric. Okay, which Dodger reliever put up negative 0.2 wins above replacement last year?
Negative.
I believe he was the only guy to go negative.
The only guy to go negative. Scott Alexander.
Boom! Look at you redeeming yourself at the end. Scott Alexander.
That was straight up guess right there.
Scott Alexander. Negative 0.2 WAR. Pedro Baez was a good guess. Platypus. I believe he was at like 0.1, so he wasn't too far behind. But yeah, Scott Alexander, negative wins above replacement last year. Some other guys I'll throw out. Victor Gonzalez was second on the Dodgers in wins above replacement. 19 and a third inning pitched. Just over a strikeout per 9 innings. Strikeout per inning. 1.4 ERA. Dylan Floro, 24 and a third innings pitched. That was the second most on the team. 2.59 ERA, so really good for Floro. Trinan, another guy we haven't talked about yet, 25 and 2/3, the most innings pitched. No surprises, the guy coming into free agency. He only struck out 7.7 batters per 9 innings, so not good. 3.86 ERA, pretty average as well. Gratterall, 21 innings pitched, 3.0 ERA, but again, 3.86 strikeouts per 9. I mean, I can't explain enough how bad that number is. Jake McGee was about 4 times higher than that. Pedro Baez, the last guy I'll mention, 17 innings pitched. Again, 6.88 strikeouts per 9. Not great, but he did have a 3.18 ERA. As we look ahead to 2021, Jake McGee is a free agent. Blake Trinan's a free agent. Alex Wood, Pedro Baez, both free agents. And Caleb Ferguson is lost to injury. So when you look back, I mean, we're going to get to 2021 here in a little bit, but let's reflect on 2020. I think there's a couple storylines that jump out to me, but I'll let you kind of hop on that first. When you think back to the 2020 Dodger bullpen, what are the storylines that kind of jump out to you?
I mean, the first one is just Kenley. Like, is he the closer? Yeah. Is he not? And I feel like that's something we're still gonna get moving forward based on Dave Roberts' comments.
Oh,
but believe it or not, like Kenley started the year really good.
Yeah.
I know even when he's getting outs, people, are still nervous when he's pitching, but he was the reliever of the month for August, which was basically the first month of the year. So he started off really good, and then it was kind of beginning of September when he started to falter, and then it really became a question of who's going to close out games for us in the postseason. But I actually thought, as far as the postseason goes, I thought, yes, Kenley did get some save opportunities, and he did okay in some and not great in others. But I don't think it was a straight up Kenley's our closer and when the 9th inning is his type of situation. And I thought that was actually really good. We saw Julio closing out games. We saw Trinan closing out games. So I've been the one guy preaching this whole time. I don't want roles in the bullpen. Yeah. I just want, I want my best guys in there whenever the middle of the order is up or top of the order, and the worst guys at the bottom of the order, regardless of what the inning is. So Yeah, the whole Kenley situation, it was fascinating to me, but I actually ultimately the way it played out in the postseason, I liked, even though there were a couple hiccups there.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to talk about the Dodger bullpen. Kenley Jansen,
Yeah.
I mean, he has been one of the best relievers in all of baseball for over the last 5 seasons, 6 seasons,
Hmm.
7 seasons. I mean, he has been elite, and yet he has gone from elite to good over the last couple seasons. And as people
Yeah.
that are expecting the 1.5 ERA Kenley Jansen, it's not getting it done. To your point, I think there is some encouragement in the fact that as the postseason went on, Dave Roberts was definitely not afraid to take him out of the closer role, which I think is a big deal. And I think that's got to be the biggest storyline going forward. Somebody, THP mentions, hey, maybe he obviously had COVID, so maybe that messed with him a little bit. I mean, I think
Yeah.
he's getting up there. Now we're going to talk about some relievers on the free agent market. None of these guys are young. Kenley Jansen is most likely dropping off a cliff because of his age. And so when we talk about some of these other guys that aren't too far behind him and talking about
Hmm.
2, 3, 4 year contracts, it's just one thing to keep in mind. Shout out to Ray, who's joining us on Periscope. We appreciate that. Some other people mentioning Blake Trinan and his performance in the playoffs, Caleb Ferguson in the regular season, Victor Gonzalez in the postseason. I mean, for me, it's Victor Gonzalez, I think, is the next one. This is a guy that,
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of before this year. I'm sure he was on the radar of some prospect guys. I feel like I stay somewhat up to speed on prospects, not like Justin Lorber or somebody like that. But I mean, I don't know if anybody was expecting this. He was great. I mean, like, not necessarily like pencil him in to be the future closer, but like a guy that I feel great about having in the 7th or 8th inning for the next 5 or 6 years. Obviously, some big moments in the playoffs. Love sort of the passion that he plays with as well. But I mean, I think Victor Gonzalez and then obviously Gratterall. And I don't even say Gratterall as a total positive, but just the
Hmm.
mixed bag that is Brusdar Gratterall. 3.00 ERA. I mean, I think most people think of Gratterall, they think of this guy who's just dominant. He was good. Like, if you just look at his numbers, I mean, Kenley Jansen was a better pitcher than Brusdar Gratterall in 2020. And I don't think that's totally arguable, again, if you're just looking at the numbers. So, but when you talk about perception between those two guys, it's a different story.
Yeah, yeah, and let me start with Gonzalez. Like you, I didn't really know
Yeah.
anything about him before 2020. Um, the two people I follow, two guys. One of them is Justin Lorber, who you mentioned, future Dodgers. He follows all the prospect stuff. It was him and one other guy I follow on Twitter. Before the season, we're both tweeting about how Victor Gonzalez by the end of the year was going to be a high leverage guy for the Dodgers, and I was like, who
Yeah.
is this
Who?
Victor Gonzalez? I never heard of him before. And it turns out they were right, man. Victor Gonzalez was awesome all year long, came up big in the postseason. And that's a guy who's going to be under club control for many years to come. He's still really young. So
Yeah.
that's a fixture in the Dodger bullpen for many years to come. I'm excited for that. And then, yeah, Gratterall, we all love him. He's young. He's full of energy. He throws really hard, obviously. So he's a joy to watch. But like you said, it was a mixed bag. And that was kind of expected. It's his first full major league season. He's 21
Yeah.
years
He's super
old or
young.
whatever he is. So I do think he was really good, but at the same time, there's still room for growth there. You mentioned how low his strikeout
Ugh.
numbers were, and it's honestly eye-popping
Yeah.
how low they were for someone who throws as hard as he does. Like, he should be striking out at least one guy an inning
Yeah.
when he throw 101 miles an hour with a good slider. So that's something he's got to work on. He's got to find a way to punch guys out, because if I feel like the organization still views him as their closer of the future. Maybe not in 2021, but I think eventually he's the guy they want to take over as a closer. So if that's going to be the case, he's got to start striking some guys out, because if guys are making contact off you, it's only sooner or later that the luck is going to catch up with you. I feel like he had a pretty lucky year on balls in play in 2020, so maybe that won't be the same going forward.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing, right? When we talk about Jansen sort of phasing out of this career. Obviously, he's got one more year left under contract. We've got some people in the chat that would like that to be 0 more years, but he's due $20 million this year. We've been over this. He is not going anywhere. I can assure you of that. The Dodgers are not going to pay somebody else to take him because he's still a productive reliever. But then the question becomes, okay, who's next behind Jansen? And if we're looking internally, I think we just mentioned the two most likely guys. Again, if it's coming internally, it's going to be either Victor Gonzalez or Brusdar Gratterall. The other name you could throw in there is Julio Urias. I mean, I feel like Gonzalez right now, he's left-handed. he feels more polished, but he also feels like the ceiling. I mean, Gratterall, you watch him and you're like, okay,
Right.
like he has the potential to be one of the 5 best closers in all of baseball. I don't necessarily see that in
Right.
Gonzalez. So, I mean, are you on the Gratterall train? Like that's sort of where you would hitch your wagon and say, if I had to pick one of these guys, whether it's Urias, Gonzalez, or Gratterall, that you would ride with Gratterall as your closer of kind of the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I'd say Gratterall still, makes the most sense as a closer. I trust the Dodgers and their pitching coaches and such to work with him to refine his pitches or whatever the case may
Yeah.
be. There's a reason why he wasn't striking guys out, and we need to get, they need to get to the bottom of
Yeah.
that and figure that out so he could be punching more guys out. Because when you throw 101, 102 miles an hour, you got a good off-speed pitch, guys shouldn't be making contact as often as they do against him.
Yeah.
But Gonzalez, I think he's just going to be a really good high leverage lefty reliever for many years to come. I don't think he's a guy that you just say, here's the 9th inning,
Yeah.
it's yours. His strikeout numbers are better than Gratterall's, but his are not like eye popping by any means. He still kind of pitches to contact as well. And we saw him in the postseason. He struggled with his control a little bit too. So I'm high on Gonzalez. I don't think he's going to be a closer. And then Julio, I think we talked about him last week when we were talking about starters. We both think he's going to be a starter. Until the organization tells us different,
Yeah.
I'm just going to assume he's going to be a starter.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm with you. The value is just there, right? Like he obviously is
Yeah.
capable of pitching and as a starter. And if you can get a guy that can give you 4 to 6 innings, that's significantly more valuable than a closer will ever be. And I mean, you're right. Like when you have Jansen, it's easy to say Jansen's our closer because he's your best pitcher no matter the situation, essentially. Now, I think with Andrew Friedman, I can't imagine he wants to have a closer. And as soon as Jansen is out of there, I'm guessing he wants to just be able to move that to a committee type thing. And so I don't think Urias is the guy. But yeah, I mean, I think with Gratterall and Gonzalez, you've got a nice sort of back end of the bullpen moving forward. Is there anybody else from that list of guys that are still under contract that you want to talk about? I mean, obviously, Caleb Ferguson was impressive. He kind of tapered off, struggled a little bit, and then obviously he's going to miss this entire season, which is unfortunate. They still do have Dylan Floro, who is perpetually underrated, Scott Alexander, and then Joe Kelly. I mean, Adam Kolarek. Any hope for Joe Kelly figuring this out and becoming the guy that they signed, or is he just who he is, sort of a wild card that you're just waiting for the contract to expire?
Hey, he had a 0.00
Yeah, who am I? Excuse
ERA
me.
last year.
Excuse
So
me.
I don't know how you could get any better than that. No, but in all honesty, I've had Joe Kelly's back
You love him.
on
It's
this
your
podcast
guy.
multiple times. He's my guy. But I feel like he just kind of is what he is. He's going to have good outings where he looks dominant, and I mean, he throws hard. He's got a good curveball, so he's going to have good outings. But I think we've seen throughout his whole career that he doesn't exactly have the best control, and I feel like at this point, I don't think that's ever going to change. So the Joe Kelly we've gotten is the Joe Kelly we're going to get unless he somehow figures out how to throw a ball where he wants to throw it, which I don't see happening.
Yeah. And I could be wrong. I thought I had Kelly as a 0.0 ERA. Now I'm starting to doubt that maybe that's not the case. Maybe he actually did give up a run. I'm trying to look it up. Okay, maybe, I mean, I don't know where I saw it. Maybe as a split or something. He did give up a run, so apologies to the Joe Kelly haters. I think his ERA was like 1.8 this year, not 0.
Okay.
So apologies. He had 2 earned runs he gave up in one. But yeah, I mean, Kelly, the thing about Kelly is he wasn't even good when they signed him. I mean, that's like this is the most confusing signing. When they go out and get a guy like Pollock, I understand people question that, but like Pollock, you could at least point to and say, like, look what he has done. It's there. Kelly was like a 4.5 ERA guy. All he had done was he had been good, like basically against the Dodgers in the World Series, and he presented.
And he was really good.
He was really good, for like a month. So, and now that we've seen him kind of consistently, you're like, yeah, okay, that's exactly who he is. A guy who is going to look really good for a couple weeks and then just like one of the worst pitchers in all of baseball. So, I don't know. I don't know what to do with Kelly other than just be thankful that his contract is up at the end of this year.
It's the last
and
year,
that we're never going to have to deal with that. And then the rest of these guys, I mean, I think Floro, Kolarek, guys like that, they're just nice pieces. I mean, they're not going to be back end of the bullpen guys, but I think this is the thing that separates the Dodgers from a bullpen perspective and maybe that gets underappreciated. I think there's probably lots of team in the majors where like their 6th or 7th bullpen arm is just awful. It's like the guy who comes
Yeah.
out and has like a 5.5 ERA, and you're just like, oh, freaking,
Right.
like, great. We have nobody available, and it's the 6th inning, and we're just about to get rucked. The Dodgers don't have that. Like, their 7th or 8th or 9th or 10th best relief pitcher is a guy like Floro, who had a 2.6 ERA, or Kolarek, who had a under 1 ERA. So I think that's
Right.
kind of what separates the Dodgers, and maybe that's why they have a bad rap, because to the average fan, they're not appreciating the depth. They're only looking at who's my guy in the 7th, who's my guy in the 8th, and who's my guy in the 9th. And maybe that's where the Dodgers have been lacking the last couple of years.
Yeah, yeah, and all those guys you mentioned, they're pretty much just innings eaters, which you need throughout the course of a 162 game season. Like, they're not going to be the highest leveraged of guys. They're not coming in a 3-2 game in the 8th inning, but they're going to give you, 50 to 60 innings a year with a mid 3 ERA, somewhere around there. They're just solid pitchers. They're not the guys you trust most in the postseason by any means, but you got to fill out a bullpen somehow. And like you said, those guys would be high leverage guys in a lot of other places. Dylan Floro, Kolarek, they've produced whenever called upon. So I like that we have those guys still, even if we're still sitting here saying we need 1 or 2 more bullpen arms. This Dodgers bullpen, there's a lot of depth to it, even as is.
Well, and so let's look ahead now to 2021. Obviously, we've covered the guys who are there and have been there. Now let's look at the 2 guys the Dodgers have added so far, and then we'll sort of close out the show by talking about what everybody probably wants to get to eventually, which is the guys that are out there. So the biggest acquisition the Dodgers have made is Corey Knebel. They traded a very low-level prospect for a guy that was about to be cut. They accepted him, got his last year of his deal. He's due approximately $5 million. Now, Knebel, we've touched on this a little bit, so this might be review, but 2017, he basically had one of the better relief pitcher seasons we've ever seen. Among pitchers with 70 innings pitched or more, this includes starters, 3rd in ERA, 1.78, 4th in FIP, 4th in saves. He had the highest strikeout per 9 of 14.92. Okay, the next highest guy on that list was 2 strikeouts lower than him. He had the best strand rate. He had the highest strikeout percent, 41% of batters he struck out. Now, 2018, strikeout per 9, pretty similar, 14.31. ERA drifts up to 3.5. FIP was 3.03, so still pretty solid. 2019 misses all of it to Tommy John. 2020, 13 innings pitched, 6.08 ERA. If there's one concern with him, control. Even in 2017, as good as he was, he had the 4th worst walk rate of anybody in all of baseball. Last year, that was 5.4 walks per 9 innings. So Knebel's an interesting guy. Again, the ceiling, we've seen it before, but what's your take on Corey Knebel and kind of where you see him fitting into the bullpen?
Yeah, this is just kind of Friedman throwing a dart and hoping it sticks. Like you just threw out the numbers. Knebel was as good as it gets a couple years ago. He had the Tommy John, which is never ideal for a pitcher, but I think we've seen in recent years guys come back from Tommy John a lot easier now, and sometimes they even throw harder than they were before. So I don't think it's as big of a concern as it used to be. But Knebel's still only 29, right? This isn't like they're signing some washed guy who they're hoping to get his last few throws out of him. This is not the case. Knebel, he's still young. He still has it's a 1-year deal. So he's got a lot to prove. The Dodgers will gladly take whatever they could get out of him, whether that's him being the closer, which if he returns to his 2017 form is definitely possible. He was the Brewers closer, had a lot of saves that year. Or if he's kind of like the guys I just mentioned, a guy that just eats innings and is decent, like that's fine too. I mean, they'll take what they could get. They didn't really give up a whole lot for him. It was a player to be named, I think it was like some lower. At first it was a player to be named later. Then they came out and said it was like a lower level prospect. So they basically got him for free. And anytime Friedman goes after bullpen guys, it seems to work.
Unless you're Joe Kelly.
So I'm hoping for the best for Knebel. He could end up being a big weapon in that bullpen.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about this before, so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but my strategy for the Dodgers is, again, they have the depth pieces. I mean, people in the chat have mentioned guys like Josh Spores, Mitchell White, Dennis Santana. I mean, the Dodgers have a bunch of these guys that if you take Santana or Mitchell White and convert them to a relief pitcher, you're probably going to get a guy who can put solid numbers. So the Dodgers don't need to go sort of scour the relief pitcher market for these 7th inning Dylan Floro types, because they already have about 8 extra of those guys on their roster.
Right.
If there's one place the Dodgers need help, it's on the elite side. So if I'm the Dodgers, the only people I'm going out to add are the boom or bust type guys. Like, give me the guy that has the potential to be one of my top 3 relief pitchers on a World Series team. Now, is it a 40% chance he gets there and a 60% chance he busts? I'm fine with that because I don't want the safe play like, hey, he's going to be a 3.5 ERA guy and he's for sure going to be that. Like, I don't want that. I want the guy that might get me the 1.9 ERA. And if it doesn't pan out, then so be it. $5 million, no skin on my back. And that's Knebel. I mean, Knebel was in a bullpen with Josh Hader and he was the better arm. And this was 3 years ago, which isn't that long ago for a guy who's not even 30. So I'm with you. I mean, even in 2018, again, striking out over 14 batters per 9 innings. That would have been the top mark on the Dodgers. Now, 2019 misses, 2020 small sample size. So if you want to be optimistic, there's all the room in the world to be optimistic about Knebel. But to me, that's the type of signing I like. And the next guy's the same thing. A guy that Dodger fans were I'm sure, thrilled to see the name come across, and that's Brandon Morrow. Yeah. Now, Brandon Morrow's 36 years old. Okay, we're about to talk about some relief pitchers and age. Let's just put into context. Brandon Morrow is 36 years old. But keep this in mind, 43.2 innings pitched for the Dodgers in 2017, an ERA just over 2, a FIP of 1.55. So we're talking elite. Now, the Dodgers ran him into the ground in the playoffs and then said sayonara, Blake Trinan style. 2018, he signs with the Cubs, 1.47 ERA with the Cubs, 30.2 innings pitched for the first half. So he was great. The problem, missed the whole second half with elbow injuries, missed all of 2019 and 20 with shoulder surgery, elbow injuries and then shoulder surgeries. Brandon Morrow's last appearance was July 15th of 2018. July 15th of 2018, the last time he pitched. So it's been a while. He's 36, but the flip side is we've never seen him be bad. The last time he pitched was 1.47 ERA for the Cubs. It's a minor league deal. There's no guarantee here, but I don't see, I mean, obviously there's no downside, but I mean, I feel like this is going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a minor league deal, so there's no risk involved. If it doesn't work out, no sweat off the Dodgers' back. But this is another guy who's proven, like you said, he's proven to be elite, and that's what the Dodgers are looking for. If he gets anywhere close to what he was with the Dodgers last time, that's huge. Like this in 2017, there was not an arm in that bullpen that we trusted more than Brandon Morrow, and Dave Roberts could say the same thing, and it was to a fault. Exactly. He pitched him all 7 games in the World Series, and the only time he got hit was when the Astros knew what was coming. So, yeah, I love the Brandon Morrow signing. I'm like you. I think it could work out. Like we saw it happen once before in LA with this exact guy. Yeah. So if he's healthy and he's back to an organization where he's familiar with the training staff, he's familiar with the pitching coaches, he knows a lot of the relievers in that bullpen that are still around from when he was there. So yeah, I'm happy about this signing, and I would not be surprised at all if come October, Brandon Morrow is pitching, big time innings again for the Dodgers.
Yeah, absolutely. And another name that got mentioned in the chat by Harpazo was Jimmy Nelson, signed right about the same time. Now, my understanding, if I remember this correctly, I think they've mentioned that Nelson is going to be tried out as a starter. They want to kind of keep him as like their number 6 or their number 7 starting pitcher. But, I mean, who knows? That could materialize as kind of the swing role. The odds that all 6 guys ahead of him are healthy on opening day, and if right. only 5 are, then he's probably the 6th guy kind of in the Ross Stripling type role as well. Brock Stewart's another guy that, Andrew Friedman has spoke highly of. The Dodgers liked him. I thought it was interesting. I think this is what Friedman said, but it was something along the lines of, when Stewart was with the Dodgers, he kind of got rushed a little bit. They felt like he kind of got thrown into some situations as a starting pitcher and then as a reliever, maybe before he was ready because the Dodgers needed him to do it. And then he kind of went other places and faltered. And so obviously Friedman's going to give you the optimistic view, and nobody's in love with Brock Stewart. But his thought was, hey, maybe we can sort of build some of the foundational stuff that he missed as a 22, 23, 24-year-old guy. And who knows what happens. Again, minor league contract. No skin off their back. It's probably, he's going to be like the 8th or 9th or 10th starting pitcher and spend a lot of time at AAA if minor league baseball happens this year and that kind of thing. So those are the 2 guys they've added so far, Morrow and Knebel, that I think would be sort of the biggest influencers, if you will, of the 2020, which leads to the conversation everyone wants to have. Free agents that are available. There are 3 guys at the top of the market. Liam Hendriks is at the top all by himself, in a tier all by himself. And then below him are Brad Hand and Trevor Rosenthal that are kind of in a similar boat. And so those are the 3 guys I want to talk about. Per usual, I've got some notes, some stats, some thoughts on each of these guys, but let's start with Liam Hendriks. Liam Hendriks, the best relief pitcher in baseball from 2019 to 2020. It's not even that close. His wins above replacement over the last 2 years, I was looking this up. I was like, oh man, Brad Hand was 5th in wins above replacement the last 2 years. He was 5th. Liam Hendriks had twice as many wins above replacement as he did over the last 2 years. So absolutely insane how good Hendriks has been. A 1.8, 1.78 ERA the last 2 years, a FIP that's lower than that. 99 appearances. He strikes out 13 batters per 9, low walk rate, 39 saves. And then you look at the StatCast, expected ERA, elite. Percentage of times barrel him up, elite. Whiff percentage, elite. He struck out 40% of the batters he faced this past season, 37% the year before, and he's walking 3.3% of the batters he faces. He's a four-seamer guy, so he's different. There's nothing not to like about Liam Hendriks. The only question is how many years and how much money. The report is the Dodgers have kicked the tires, as have a number of teams, but that Hendriks is holding out for a 4-year contract. So, Daniel, the big question for me is 4 years, $40 million for 31-year-old Liam Hendriks. Are you in or are you out?
I think 4 years is too much. I would do 3. I'd even go up to 12 million a year. So that would be a little more annually for one less year. But we've seen how these long-term deals work out for relievers. We're seeing it with Kenley right now. Yeah. Like he's heading into the last year of a 5-year deal. And I'd say they maybe got 1 or 2 good years out of that, and then a bunch of bad ones. Joe Kelly signed a 3-year deal, and we're sitting here asking when's that gonna end? Only 1 year left. Like those long-term reliever contracts never really work out well. Relievers are so volatile, even the best in the game. Like yes, like you just threw out all the numbers. Liam Hendriks has been incredible the last 2 years, and I would love to see him in a Dodger uniform. He fits perfectly. He could come in and save games right away. He could pitch multiple innings in the postseason. He did that with the A's on multiple occasions. So I think Liam Hendriks would be a great fit, but I would do three for whatever 12 times 3 for 36.
Well, I mean, and that's for me. It's like, so really, are you not going to throw $4 million at him in the 4th year?
I guess if it's 4 for 40, that's fine, but I just don't like those super long-term deals. So I guess yes, if I would do 3 for 36, then yes, I would go up to 4 for 40. But I'm not going much higher than that.
Yeah, no, I mean I hear you, and that's the thing, right? Is it's easy for us to sit here and say we want Liam Hendriks, so if that's what it takes is the 4 for 40.
Yeah.
But remember, I mean, on one hand, I think I made this argument. We did a quick on Liam Hendriks earlier last week, and I basically said, Kenley Jansen's got $20 million coming off the books next year. You've got money coming off for Baez. You've got money coming off for Alex Wood. You've got money coming off for Joe Kelly. So when you look at the amount of money that he would be, I mean, he slides right into basically the Blake Trinan number from this past year. So when you add up all the number, I mean, the Dodgers lost about $20 million in bullpen payroll this year. They're going to lose another 20 next year with Kenley Jansen. The flip side is if we're going to be the guys that say, hey, we want to re-sign Seager, we want to re-sign Buehler, we want to re-sign Bellinger.
Exactly.
I mean, you got to pick your spots here. Like if you want to go give Justin Turner, a 3-year deal, if you want to go sign DJ LeMahieu or Trevor Bauer or any of these guys, I mean, at some point that's going to cost you something in the long run. But I think I just keep coming back to, I think Hendriks is good enough. And I don't like the 4 years for a guy who's 31. And yes, like, hey, maybe the mileage is a little bit lower. It's not that much lower. I mean, he's basically got 2 years less of pitching on him than Jansen does today. So, like, if Hendriks is going to be 2 years, if he's 2 years away from where Jansen is, we're going to hate that contract.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I don't know. I guess and maybe it's just me being naive and saying, oh, whatever, it's not my money. And, I'll hate that contract 3 years from now. But I just think the performance has been so good and there's not any signs today of it getting worse. So it's not like if I know I could get the same Liam Hendriks in 2021 and maybe 2022, and then it starts to tail off, I think I feel okay about it. Obviously that's a big if, but some of these guys, it's like you can already see the end coming. I don't think we're there with Liam Hendriks.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I definitely think he's got at least 1 or 2 more good years, like just based off how he looked in 2020. He was lights out. But yeah, if there's any guy that I would be willing to go do the 4-year deal for on this market out of all the options available, he would be the guy. He's, to me at least, he's far and away the best option out there. You mentioned probably the second best option is Brad Hand, and his WAR over the last couple years is double Brad Hand's, and they're both top 5 in baseball. So that just goes to show you how good Liam Hendriks has been. So yeah, I guess if there's anyone to give that deal to, it would be him, and you just hope for the
Yeah.
best
Yeah.
after.
Well, and let's talk about the other two guys for comparison's
Yeah.
sake. And I see some questions in there about Seager and Bellinger and stuff. Hold on to those because we'll do some mailbag questions here at the end. So stuff that's
Mhm.
non-bullpen related, we'd love to chat that. But while we're on the topic, let's look at Brad Hand. Fifth in wins above replacement in 2020. He was actually fourth over the last 2 years. 2.95 ERA over his last 83 appearances, 2.40 FIP. I was surprised his strikeout numbers are pretty good, just a tad under 13 strikeouts per nine. He is a lefty, which gives something a little different. Tied for the major league lead in saves the last 2 years with Josh Hader. He is 50 for 55 in saves. So Hader, for context, is 50 for 59. The Dodgers this year were like 12 for 21. So pretty good stuff from Hand. Statcast not quite as friendly with Hand as they are of Hendriks, although all of his expected numbers are elite, 96 percentile stuff. Strikeout rate, walk rate, 92nd percentile. Interesting pitch mix. He's a slider guy 51% of the time. Fastballs and sinkers otherwise. His fastball, 91 miles an hour, 91 and a half miles an hour. So not a velocity guy, which in some ways, again, this is a guy who's a little bit older. I believe he's 31. Maybe it's nice because he's not necessarily a velocity guy. So maybe you like signing him in his 32, 33, 34 age seasons. Although that said, his fastball was already down 1.3 miles an hour and the whiff rate
Yeah.
came down with it. So the cost, though, way less. So you're not talking about a 4-year deal. You're probably not even
Right.
talking about a 3-year deal. Maybe something in the 2 for 16, 2 for 17. Again, this is a guy any team in baseball could have had for 1 year, 10 million. Nobody wanted it. So he's probably looking at 2 for 16, 2 for 17. What are your takes on Brad Hand?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Dodgers definitely have a need for a left-handed reliever right
Yeah.
now. All the guys we talked about who they added have all been righties so far. Knebel,
Morrow.
Morrow, Nelson, all those guys, they're all righties. And when you look at the lefties they got Gonzalez, who's great, but after that,
Kalarick.
it's Kalarick, who you don't really
With
trust
the
him
three
facing
batter
three
rule, yeah.
batters. Right? You like him against lefties, but not as much against righties. He's not a guy you just give an inning to, and with the 3 batter rule, so he's kind of limited. And then Scott Alexander, who we talked about, he had a negative WAR and wasn't even on the roster for the second half of the season, and definitely was not on the postseason roster. So I do think they need one more lefty out of that bullpen. But I don't know if Brad Hand's the guy. That I feel like you mentioned the velocity decrease. His velocity has been trending down for a few seasons now, not just this past season. And even though he's still been good, I mean, ideally you want relievers that throw hard and are dominant, and he's not that. He strikes out a lot of guys, like you said, but we don't know if that velocity continues to tick down. Then I feel like that affects not just his fastball, but also his slider, because you want that velo difference. So Brad Hand, as far as the top guys available, I would prefer obviously Hendriks over him. I would prefer Blake Trinan over him. So I feel like I'd rather get one of those other options and then get a lower end lefty just because you need another guy there.
Yeah, and people in the chat are mentioning a guy that you and I are aware of, Caleb Ferguson. He's out, so that's the reason we're not talking about him this year, is because he won't be pitching in 2021.
Right.
Obviously, 2022, he's going to be a big piece of the bullpen. But even just looking at the 40-man roster, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of these lower-level guys who we haven't really seen, maybe a cup of coffee, Josh Spores, Dennis Santana, Edwin Uceda, some of the guys that just got added, I mean, they're all righties.
All righty.
They're all of them.
Yeah.
Like, there's not actually another lefty. It's like Urias, Kershaw, Ferguson, Alexander, and Kalarick, and Gonzalez. I mean, that's it. That's the whole group. So, I mean, I guess I'll push back. Like, I mean, Hand's numbers are so much better than Blake Trinan's the last 2 years. Like, I mean, I know Trinan is a known commodity. I like Trinan. I think it's good, but I mean, Trinan, he was good. I mean, Hand has been elite. And is it just the velocity that scares you off, that it's a guy who was throwing 92 and a half and now he's down to 91? I mean, again, this is a guy 2.95 ERA over the last 2 years. His FIP is lower than that. The strikeout rate is double Blake Trinan's, even with the lower velocity. He is a lefty, 50 for 55 saves. Expected numbers are elite. I mean, I feel like when I looked at Brad Hand's numbers, I was underrating him in my head simply because of the velocity, when on the field and even like the sort of peripheral numbers all say he's the real deal.
No, yeah, I get that. I get that the numbers are great. But the Dodgers wouldn't be paying for the past.
Yeah.
They're paying for the future. They're paying for what he's going to look like in 2021. And if it's a longer term deal, 2022, possibly 2023, probably I would say 2 years would be the maximum
Yeah.
for either a Hand or Trinan. But I don't know. I know Trinan's numbers weren't great, but I just felt really comfortable when he was in there. And I feel like his numbers, at least this past season, were kind of skewed by a few bad outings. I'd say for the most part, he was lights out for the Dodgers. And then he would give up 3 or 4 runs once every few weeks, and that would kind of ruin his ERA or whatever. But I don't know. The velocity thing with Hand for me is concerning. I know he was still really good this past season, but I don't know what he's going to look like in the coming couple years, especially if that velocity continues to trend down, then his stuff goes with it, and who knows what you're getting there.
Yeah, and so just for context, Trinan is 32, and will turn 33 in June. I mean, yeah, Trinan had a 4.91 ERA in 2019 with Oakland, 3.86 ERA with the Dodgers in this past season. He obviously 2018 was at 0.78 year. So I mean, I'm with you. You know, I like Trinan. I'm a pro Trinan guy. I guess the more I dug into Brad Hand, the more I was fascinated, because I'm like, I think I just have become so obsessed with velocity that, I mean, looking at his strikeout numbers, I think were what changed my mind. Like, this isn't a lefty that's throwing 91, that's pitching to contact and just getting ground balls and just sort of piecing it together. Like, he's striking out 13 batters per 9 innings. And I hear you. You're not paying for the last 2 elite years. And obviously, he's 30, 31. He's getting close to the end. But I think the gap between him and Trinan statistically is enough for me to say, I like that. I like that he's a lefty, as you pointed out. That's a place the Dodgers, and I mean, and he has the closing experience as well. Obviously, Trinan does too. But I mean, he has the most saves in baseball over the last 2 seasons. So let's talk one other guy, and we could chat Trinan as well after this. But a name that we haven't talked about a ton is Trevor Rosenthal. This is a guy. If you're buying Trevor Rosenthal, you're buying his 2020 stock. 1.9 ERA last year, 14.5 strikeouts per 9 innings. StatCast loved him. 99th percentile in expected on base, expected batting average, expected ERA, 99th percentile strikeout percentage, 99th percentile fastball velocity, 95th percentile whiff rate. He throws 97.9 on average. He's 30 years old, looking at something similar to Hand, probably a tad less. 2 for 14, 2 for 15. Right-hander, 4-seamer. What do you think about Trevor Rosenthal? Any interest on kicking the tires there?
Yeah, Rosenthal is definitely a guy I'd be interested. His career has been kind of weird to this point. Like, he came up with the Cardinals and was really good, and then I don't know if it was injuries or what happened, but he was almost out of the league at one point, and then he kind of resurfaced this past year with the, I think it was the Royals, and then he got traded to the Padres. He throws really hard though, like really hard, like kind of Gratterall hard, like he'll be sitting 100. Yeah. And he throws a 4-seamer, which, as we talked about, this is the varying looks that Andrew Friedman's been talking about. If they could bring in a guy who throws a 4-seamer at 100, that's something they don't have in their bullpen right now. And that's another guy who could strike out a lot of guys. I don't know. This isn't a guy you'd bring in to be a closer, I don't think, unless he comes out looking like how he did this past year. But I think there's so much volatility within his career that you just don't know what you're going to get. So I wouldn't overpay. I'd give him, maybe a 1 or 2 year deal, but he's a guy that intrigues me for sure.
So Rosenthal, looking at his career numbers, I mean, like you said, it's a roller coaster. 2012 to 2015, he was really good. He was an all-star in 2015, but over those 4 years, sub-3 ERA guy as a relief pitcher, 45 saves in 14, 48 saves in 15. 2016 ERA jumps to 4.5. 2017 he's back to 3.4. Misses all of 2018. 2019 13.5 ERA in 22 games. That was with Washington and Detroit. Then he comes back in 2020 and he puts up a 1.9 ERA between Kansas City and San Diego. He saves 11 games. So it's a mess. The velocity is there. The spin rate is there. Again, the expected numbers are there. StatCast likes him. So he's interesting. I wonder if Knebel hadn't come into the fold. I mean, it feels like Rosenthal and Knebel are similar. Obviously, Rosenthal's a tick up velocity-wise, but I'm not sure there's enough of a gap between those two, although that's not to say you don't want both of them. So I guess now looking, Trinan's the other guy. He's probably in that same ballpark. He's probably a tad less. I guess Trinan's maybe in the 2 for 12-ish range. Rosenthal maybe 14 and Hand maybe 16. So if you had to, obviously we know how we like those guys. I guess Liam Hendriks would be our number one choice, all things
Yeah.
equal. If we're including money, I mean, if you had to give the contract of 4 for 40 to Liam Hendriks, or 2 for, what did I say? 2 for 16 for Brad Hand, 2 for 14 for Trevor Rosenthal, and 2 for 12 for Blake Trinan. Give me your ranking of those 4 who you would be interested in.
I would still put Hendricks first. Obviously, it's more money than the other guys, but I think he's that much better.
Yeah.
And I think he's gonna be that much better the next couple years. So he would be number one for me. I'm gonna put Trinan too. I think, like you just mentioned, the 2 for 12, that would be really affordable as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Like if Trinan's willing to do 2 for 12, I would call him right now and ink that down. And then I'd put Hand third, slightly above Rosenthal, just because Rosenthal is you just don't know what you're going to be getting with that guy. Whereas Brad Hand, he's been a little more consistent. So yeah, that's how I would order it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you. Again, we're talking about the Dodgers, so we're not talking about like we never want to settle, right? We just won the World Series.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about, hey, you know what? Let's save a couple $1,000,000 and not go get Liam Hendriks.
Right.
I think Liam Hendriks is the rare, I mean, genuinely the best relief pitcher in baseball, arguably right now. And he's available on the free agent market. You don't have to trade any prospects for him. And in a depressed economy, so the salary isn't necessarily going to be what it might have been otherwise. I would go sign him. I think a lot of teams are probably really hesitant on that 4th year, so maybe the Dodgers can sneak in something like 3 for 33. And if that's the case, obviously we're both over the moon. But again, I mean, as I dug into Brad Hand, I think he's my second guy. And honestly, I don't know if the gap between how much I like Hendricks for the extra years and the extra money versus Hand. I think Hand's good. Do I think he's going to be elite for the next 2 to 3 years? Maybe not elite, but I mean, I think he walks in and is the best arm in the Dodgers bullpen for the next 2 years, and it's not close. And so, whereas Rosenthal, I think the Joe Kelly thing kind of scares me off. He's got some Joe Kelly vibes to me, and I like Trinan. I just don't. I saw enough of Trinan to know what he was and what he wasn't, and maybe that's what hurts him. And again, I mean, it's a small sample size, but the ERA wasn't great. It wasn't great in 2019 either. And he had some shaky moments, as good as he was in the playoffs. Mookie Betts saved him. I believe he was on the mound for the Justin Turner play as well. So he had a couple moments where that ERA could have shifted the other direction a little bit. Lots of guys, Gratterall could say the same thing. But I mean, I like Trinan. Trinan would be my third guy on that list. So as we kind of wrap up the bullpen, and we'll get to some questions if anybody else has questions. Patrick wants to know if Hideo Nomo has anything left in the tank. I don't think Hideo Nomo is an option for the 2021 Dodgers, but who knows? But if you've got any questions, I saw some people asking about Bellinger and Seager and how we rank those guys. If you have anything, throw those in the chat now. But Daniel, as we kind of close out the conversation, how are you feeling? I mean, if the Dodgers don't add anyone, are you concerned about the Dodger bullpen? I guess I'll leave it there.
If they don't add anyone, I'm a little concerned. But I mean, they got a whole season. Like, just because they don't add anyone in the offseason doesn't mean they're not going to add anyone. Technically, they have from now until July 31st to get some bullpen help. And honestly, sometimes it's better to wait to the deadline, because then you see who's having a good year and who's actually worth giving, prospects or money to, whatever it is. So I think they're going to add someone eventually, but if they don't, I would be a little concerned. I don't think with the loss of Trinan and Baez and McGee, that's probably 3 of your 5 best relievers from last year right there, more give or take. So that's losing a bunch of guys, and going in as it currently stands, we're going into the season with Kenley Jansen really as pretty much the undisputed closer. We talked about Gonzalez and Gratterall. I don't know if they're going to be ready to make that jump yet, but I would like to see them at least bring in someone who we could at least put into the closer discussion right away.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my comment, right? Is if you're going to go get someone, it needs to be somebody that sends the message to Kenley Jansen and to everybody that there's sort of a new alpha out in the bullpen, and there's a new best pitcher. And I don't think Knable's that guy. I definitely don't think Brandon Morrow's that guy. I don't think Gratterall's that guy. I mean, I think Jansen just looks at all those guys and he's like, yeah, I'm the best guy out here still. And so it's going to be really hard to take him out of the closer role as long as he thinks that. Now, if you go get, I think Brad Hand and Liam Hendriks are the only 2 guys on the list that would change his mind. I don't think Trinan changes his mind. I definitely don't think Trevor Rosenthal would change his mind. I've mentioned going out and, hey, if Josh Hader's available, I'd go kick the tires on him for sure. I don't know if he is. I mean, obviously Devin Williams if he's available,
Yeah.
but I can't imagine he's available. So I would go
Yeah.
out and try and get an elite reliever, whether you have to trade or sign him. Obviously, Hader would be, I think his contract they're estimating is like 3 for 25. So that gives you the gap between if you could get Hader for a prospect and save yourself, $10 million over 3 years, do you do it? That's kind of the question. So, yeah, I feel okay, but I'm with you. I mean, there's plenty of time left, and we know the Dodgers can go out and get. And who knows? I mean, Josiah Gray could be ready to be a bullpen piece by the end. Dustin May or
Yeah.
Tony Gonsolin, one of those guys, is sort of out there in the bullpen. Who knows?
And there could be another Victor
Yeah.
Gonzalez, someone we're not even talking about as well. I mean, bullpen guys emerge out of nowhere, I feel like, every year.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's get to some questions here. I'm going to give this guy a shout out just because his name involves Blink 182. So shout out to Blink 182. Big Blink fan over here. But does Corey Seager make the move to third base in the near future? What do you think, Daniel? Do you think at any point in the next, however long Corey Seager does he end his career or in the next, I guess let's say this, in the next 3 to 5 years, is he playing third base?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that depends on a couple different factors. First of all, we got to wait and see who the Dodgers get to play third base this year, if anyone. That would kind of change things. But I don't think they're going to acquire a shortstop this winter. So I definitely think he'll be playing short this year. And he'll finish out his last year of club control as a shortstop. And then once he hits free agency, we'll see from there. I don't know whether it's the Dodgers or another team, but I feel like those are discussions that get talked about in those free agent meetings. And if he wants to play shortstop, there's no doubt there's a team that'll let him do it. So I guess it just depends how important it is to him. We saw Manny Machado said he wanted to play shortstop. Then the Padres said, we'll give you $300 million to play third base. And he said, absolutely. So we'll see. I definitely think, I don't think Seager's a career long shortstop guy. You just see with guys his size, he's 6'4". Those guys end up at third base. We saw it with Cal Ripken. We saw it with A-Rod. We've seen it with so many guys. There's too many injury concerns for a 6'4" shortstop long term. So I think maybe he does have 3 or 4 years left at shortstop, and then after that, maybe he makes the move to either third or first. So I don't even know if I answered the question, but I think he'll be at short this year. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, if he makes it to free agency, he's going to get to decide how much he cares about playing shortstop. And the second thing I would say is with the Dodgers. I mean, I think a lot of people were penciling him to third because they assumed Gavin Lux would be the shortstop of the future. And I think defensively, there's some questions there. So I don't think there's an obvious take his spot at shortstop guy within the Dodger system. And obviously, we're both hoping that he stays with the Dodgers. So I think he has been better defensively than all of the people expected him to be, who were saying, hey, he's not a long-term shortstop. I think there were lots of people saying, hey, I don't know, he's big, blah, blah, blah. I mean, he's been really good defensively, better than I think people expect. So a couple more questions. Harpazo asks, do we need an extra starting pitcher, maybe a guy like Corey Kluber? We talked about this a little last time. I don't think the Dodgers are going to, I mean, Kluber, it's just what's the upside? I mean, I don't think Corey Kluber in 2021, there's a reasonable chance that he's a better starting pitcher than May, Gonsolin, or Urias, or I should say is worth having to take innings away from any of those guys. I think we agree the only guy we would go out and sign starting pitcher-wise was if you wanted to go crazy on Trevor Bauer.
Yeah, you said it. I agree. If they're going to get a starter, it's either an ace type guy or just like a depth piece, like a swingman type guy, which they kind of already filled with Jimmy Nelson, but he might have some health concerns, so maybe they get another guy similar to that. But yeah, I don't think they need to go and get a third or fourth starter. Like they already have, plenty of starters.
Yeah. Okay, one other name that got thrown out. This is from Norm Lee. Archie Bradley. Any interest in Archie Bradley? Obviously, this is a guy the Dodgers are familiar with, former closer for the Diamondbacks, involved in some notable moments, lots of walk-offs.
Yeah.
But he's interesting. I mean, he was always a guy that would throw multiple innings. He threw hard. Obviously has struggled of late. He's sort of a low-end relief pitcher guy. But would you kick the tires on Archie Bradley?
If it's cheap, absolutely. I mean, obviously he played with the Diamondbacks for a while, so he's kind of a rival. I mean, however you want to put that. But he got into it with the Dodgers a couple times. Matt Kemp hit a couple bombs off him, which was fun. But I would, if it's for cheap, if it's a 1-year, $5 million deal, I would absolutely kick the tires on Archie Bradley. He's had some good years, like you said. He throws hard. I don't think he would come in and be the closer by any means, but if you could add another arm like that for cheap, why not?
Yeah, I mean, so Bradley's only 28. I just pulled up his stats. This is a guy 1.7 ERA in 2017, 3.6 in 18, 3.5 in 2019, 2.95 last year. So I mean, he's
pretty good year.
Those numbers are that included a trade. He was traded from Arizona to Cincinnati, and obviously small sample size all over the place. But yeah, I mean,
right.
Bradley is like, he's better than, I mean, he would probably slot into like a Pedro Baez type role. And they
Definitely
need somebody there, and he's an upgrade over Pedro Baez, I think. Although I like Baez, so maybe I should hold my tongue there. I think
I'd say they're pretty comparable.
They're different, just different guys.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, last question. Angel asks, will Josiah Gray get called up soon? Pretty young guy, not really a natural place for him. What do you think? He's not even on the 40-man roster, which would be problematic.
He's not.
So that's an issue for him. But what I mean, from what you know of Josiah Gray, what's your take on sort of his timeline?
It's hard to say because if he would have had a full 2020 minor league season where he could have gotten 20, 25 starts at AAA or whatever and continued to develop, like you said, he's still really young. I think today might be his birthday. I saw that on
23 years old.
He turned 23 years old today. So I still think he could use one more minor league season. Hopefully he'll get that in 2021. Then maybe we could see him as a September type call up this next year. And who knows from there, if he contributes at that point, maybe he's worthy of a postseason roster spot. Probably not. But yeah, I think he still needs like almost at least a half a minor league season or probably a full minor league season to really come knocking on the door.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at him and say 23, what are we waiting for? Remember, this is a position player that was converted to pitcher. This was part of the absolute fleecing. The Dodgers did a salary dump to the Cincinnati Reds and took back Jeter Downs, who was part of the Mookie Betts trade, as well as Josiah Gray, who, by the way, is now the number one prospect in the Dodgers system, according to some places. I think it was Fangraphs that had him as the number one guy in the Dodgers system. So he's coming. I mean, the one thing with the Dodgers is the 40-man roster does matter. For most teams, if your best prospect, calling them up to the 40-man is no big deal. The Dodgers have limited space. They have to leave guys unprotected. So, they're not, sort of chomping at the bit to have him taking up a 40-man spot. Is he one of the 15 or 20 best pitchers in the Dodgers system? Absolutely. I mean, if they just needed to win a game tomorrow and could use anyone, he'd be in the bullpen for sure. But that's just not how it works. So to your point, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in the majors at some point this upcoming season, but I think 2022 is probably the more realistic opportunity. Philip Choi asks, I'll just throw this one out there. Are there any Dodger prospects who are closers? It's kind of a nice summary to our conversation of the bullpen. Not on the 40-man. A lot of the guys, the Dodgers are very big on keeping guys as starting pitchers as long as they possibly can. So while there are some relief-only guys, a guy like Jordan Sheffield, who they lost in the Rule 5 draft, Kozlowski, I think his name is a guy they didn't add to the 40-man. Yeah. He's a relief-only guy, but all the guys they added, Uceda, Carrillo, are starters. Now, do they have careers as starters? Do they end up as hard-throwing bullpen arms? I think probably, but none of those guys are. I mean, even Gratterall, when the Dodgers acquired Gratterall, everything they said was they were going to keep him as a starter. So a lot of these, elite closers typically don't come up through the minors as elite closers.
Yeah. And I think that's the name right there, Gratterall. If you're talking about a young guy in the organization who's a future closer, that's him right there. He's the same age as all those prospects you just named. So his thing is he's just at the majors already, so he's not considered a prospect. But I think if there's anyone that's going to take over that closer role in the future out of guys in the organization right now, it would be him.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. In the spirit of the holiday season, we're asking for Liam Hendriks for Christmas, maybe a little Blake Trinan on the side in our stockings as well. So we'll see what happens. Hey, we appreciate you guys joining us as always. DodgerHeads Live. We're live every Monday night. We'll be back next week as well. We're taking a break from some of the shorter videos a little bit around the holidays, but we'll be back next Monday, DodgerHeads Live. So stay tuned for that at 9 p.m. and then into 2021. I accidentally tweeted out this was our second to last show. I meant to say second to last show of the year, live show of the year. We will be back in 2021. We're not retiring. We're not going out on top as World Series champs quite yet. So we appreciate you guys joining us. Thanks as always, whether on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Make sure you check out DodgerBlue.com for the latest updates. Dodger Blue 1958, anywhere you do social media. That's Daniel Starkin. I'm Jeff Spiegel. We appreciate you. And just remember,